Could Darryn Peterson be back, and could this be KU's toughest game of the season as they host UConn on a Tuesday night in Allen Fieldhouse?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we are breaking down Kansas and UConn. It is a big-time battle in Allen Fieldhouse. Should be an awesome game between two great teams. Potential looming return, question mark, of Darryn Peterson. We're going to break that all down. Impact of if he plays, if he doesn't play, UConn scouting and import players to watch matchups of the game, and all that on today's episode of the show. And this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. And you can get $20 off your first purchase. Again, Locked On College at Game Time. So sorry here for Kansas against UConn. Let's start with the Darryn Peterson update. So we heard from Bill Self yesterday at a KU media availability, and this is what Bill Self had to say on Darryn Peterson. He said, quote, "He has practiced. He's gone up and down. The hesitancy I have is that before we announce anything is he has to test out medically from a strength and flexibility standpoint. And we'll know that in the morning. So still no answer, but we'll be able to say something definitively in the morning." Now, is this a situation, right? You can read this a couple ways. One, is there a little gamesmanship here, right? Like, are you trying to get UConn to prepare for one team when it's going to be the other? Are you trying to get UConn to be underprepared for Darryn Peterson? I don't expect them to do that, but you know, I don't know. Are there certain like gamesmanship things that you try to do here? The other potential way of looking at this is this Bill Self like leaning to the answer of I'm expecting him to play, but I don't want to get into a situation where I say today he's expected to play, and then all of a sudden tomorrow it starts to tighten up again, and then he can't play. And now I've told everyone he's going to play, and then he can't end up going, and everybody's going to be mad at me. Like, that's another way of kind of looking at things here. So I think either of those would make sense. The thing of him saying he's gone up and down, I don't think that I don't think he's referring to he's jumping up and down or that he's practiced and then not practiced. I think he's saying he's gone up and down the court. So I think that's a good sign. The question is, does Bill Self hold him back in any way, right? Does Bill Self want to play this as close to the vest, as tight as possible, especially after going 3-0 last week in the players era, where it affords you a little bit more leeway in a game like this? I do think it would just make so much sense for Darryn Peterson to return in this game on the big stage, but also it becomes challenging for KU to a certain aspect. Like, they've started to find their groove. They played really well last week, and now all of a sudden it's not like you're introducing, okay, so for instance, like Jayden Dawson, there was an update there as well, and Dawson apparently practiced on Monday, and Bill Self said he's available for the game. There's not even like a wrap or anything on his hand or wrist. So like, that's great news for Jayden Dawson. It doesn't like upset the ecosystem, so to speak, for Jayden Dawson to re-enter into the lineup, because Dawson is a role player who's expected to, okay, come on, hit some threes, like do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that. And it's like, okay, are you going to be ahead or behind of this guy in the rotation? But either way, you're kind of asked to do the same thing. When Darryn Peterson comes into the game, it not only is an impact on, hey, you now have this really good player, and it is a positive. I'm not trying to make this sound like obviously it is huge, a gigantic positive to have Darryn Peterson back. It's just you have to readjust things. You have to recalibrate before you kind of get rolling, right? Like Flory Bidunga's role of handling the ball a little bit more and passing a little bit more and getting assists, maybe that goes down a little bit. Melvin Council having the ball in his hands a ton. He's still going to have the ball in his hands a ton, but it'll be a little less with Darryn Peterson. Guys knowing where to go, knowing where to be, who they defend. Like, all those things change slightly with Peterson in the lineup. And again, it is a good thing. You want Darryn Peterson in the lineup. My point is more so, will it take a game or two for everybody to recalibrate their role? Will it take a game or two to knock the rust off for Darryn Peterson? And if that is the case, that becomes very challenging when you're taking on one of the best teams in the country in UConn. But if this is a seamless transition, then you're talking about a team who we saw last week at the players era go 3-0, beat a really good Tennessee team in the third place game. And now you're adding the potential #1 pick in the NBA draft back to that. That could be lethal. That could be filthy of what Kansas could bring to the table when they are a fully healthy team. And that is very exciting to potentially see that on display against, like I said, one of the best teams in the country in Yukon, if we do see Darryn Peterson back on Tuesday night. Now, I think beyond that, the importance of this game is, again, like if Peterson is back, I think the importance to me immediately becomes meshing with Darryn Peterson, right? Like showing that he has the rust knocked off and that the team can, work around him in the most positive way possible. I think they will be able to, but that's kind of the question, especially right away. Beyond that, I think it's kind of about backing up last week. Was last week an aberration and you beating Tennessee? Was it a crazy run and a fun upset? Or was it what this team is? And if you go out there and beat UConn, then who I think I think it was Trilly Donovan releases this it's like an aggregate rankings of like Ken Pom, Bart Torvik, a couple other metric sites. It has the AP poll in there, like all sorts of inputs into it. And it has UConn like fourth in the country. If you're able to, let's say Peterson doesn't go, if you contend with UConn, then again, it's more proof that, okay, this team, is pretty good even without Peterson. If Peterson can go, then you kind of want to see that, like what is the ceiling of this team with Peterson? And if the ceiling of this team with Peterson is a team you think can win a national title, make a Final Four, then playing at home, as good as UConn is, you would hope to kind of win that game or at least give yourself a shot to win that game, right? And so I think this is also about kind of not just backing up what you did last week to prove that, it wasn't just one good week, that it is who you are this year. It also is about reaching that next level. Like, I think what we saw, Tennessee is a good team. Tennessee's a very good team. They're top 10, top 15 team in the country. UConn is a top 5 team in the country. And so there is that difference there of if you can beat a top 10 or top 15 team in the country versus if you can beat one of the elite, which would be the Yukon Huskies. And so if you can win a game like this, if you can beat UConn, then it proves that, okay, you showed against Tennessee, you showed without Darryn Peterson against Duke that you could be a good team. Can you be a great team? Can you be an elite team? And that's what you would potentially have the opportunity to do, I think, in this game against UConn. So I think it'll be really fun. I hope we get to see Darryn Peterson because he's really fun to watch play basketball. And then I just want to see if Kansas can capitalize off the momentum last week while mixing in Peterson and make just a fascinating, really exciting team kind of happen. Because to this point, I think people have been very enthused with what this team kind of looks like and how fun it is to watch. But going to be an electric atmosphere against UConn. Certainly not going to be an easy one. Obviously, KU hoping for a similar result to the last time they hosted UConn a couple years ago, but obviously a different result on the end of the season that year. All right, let's continue on with our UConn scouting report. We'll get to players to watch, matchups of the game, all that and more. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because there's cyber sales here, and the deals are huge. I've gotten Omaha Steaks as a gift to me before, and it is an amazing gift, right? You get a bunch of steaks at the door. You feel whenever you do get it, whether it's for your birthday, whether it's for Christmas, right? Whether it's for, I don't know, somebody's coming over for New Year's and they're like, you know what? Thank you for hosting the New Year's party upcoming. Like, I'm going to send you a bunch of steaks and we're going to grill out or whatever. You feel like a kid on Christmas morning when you open that box and you see, oh, what are the sides that got picked out for me? What type of steaks did I get here, right? It's just honestly like the kind of gift that brings people together. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during the cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That is omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and thank you for the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. You can find us anywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Okay, UConn comes into this game at 6-1 on the season. Dan Hurley, the head coach. Will Dan Hurley get a technical? Will Dan Hurley upset the home Kansas fans? That will be, I think, an interesting storyline anytime Dan Hurley goes on the road. But UConn's been awesome so far this season. They have a strong win against BYU, who's obviously expected to be one of the better teams in the Big 12, 86-84. And then they most recently took on a Illinois team that is like a very old European It's like a, I don't know, Serbian team, basically. They dominated them 74-61. And so far, the lone loss is one of the other teams that I would deem to be one of the best teams in the country. And that would be Arizona, where they lost 71-67. They also have an exhibition win over what's been a really good Michigan State team so far. So for my money, UConn is one of the, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 best teams in the country. And maybe that's underselling it. So you have a real chance to kind of show what you are, right? I think a lot of people started to sleep on Kansas. Peterson gets hurt. They get blown out by North Carolina because of bad second half. You lose by double digits to Duke, albeit without Peterson. This is a chance to wake the people up, so to speak, right? But so far, UConn, again, 4th on Bart Torvik, 7th on Ken Pom. They're 4th in those like aggregate rankings I referenced. This is a very loaded starting 5. Like in the preseason, basket under review and 3-man weave had all 5 of their starters on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd team all Big East in the preseason. I think one of the big questions was going to be, how is the depth going to come together for them? And they have very talented depth, some interesting freshmen. And I think one of those is really hitting a guy like Eric Ryby, a guy that KU was recruiting at kind of the center position. But anyway, point being, this is a very talented squad. You look at the 3 strengths for this team. Rim pressure is one of them. They are in the 86th percentile in paint points per game. So they attack the rim. They can do it via the post up with Terrace Reed. They can do it off the dribble drive. They're also shooting almost 70% at the rim. That is top 50 nationally. And they're getting a lot of attempts there. It's not just that, hey, they're shooting well at the rim, but it's limited attempts because whatever. No, like they're attacking it. They're making them. And I think you also see that in the free throw rate. They're 93rd percentile in adjusted free throw attempt rate, right? When you adjust for kind of the schedule and who they're going up against. So they put pressure on the rim. That'll obviously be interesting for Kansas, a team who has blocked a lot of shots and has been a really good rim defense team, but also because they're a thinner team in the front court. That does beg the question, could this be a game where KU gets in foul trouble? And if so, what happens? And that would certainly only add to the idea of getting Darryn Peterson and Jayden Dawson back, because even though it doesn't lengthen the big depth, it does lengthen the team depth. Passing the ball for KU, or I'm sorry, for UConn, is another strength here. They're in the 95th percentile in assist rate, and they're also in the 98th percentile in assist to turnover rate. So they share the ball. They've got a lot of good players who are willing to pass it around. It can be anybody's given night, right? They'll have balanced scoring. They've got anybody on any given night who can, get you 20 points. They've got like 4 or 5 guys who can kind of do that. And they do share the ball, and they do it without turning the ball over. And I think it helps that they have some 3-point threats on the outside that kind of help get some of those assists. And it helps that you have a big man who's leading your team in points per game right now. But yeah, it's a good passing team as well. And then defensive playmaking is another strength for UConn. They are in the 92nd percentile in steal rate, so they're getting a lot of those. 96th percentile in block rate, so they're getting a lot of those. That leads to, if you combine the two, 98th percentile in Hakeem rate. And they're doing it all without fouling. 90th percentile in personal foul efficiency. Now, we're going to get into something later, but they are sending teams to the free throw line too much, but the fouls themselves aren't coming. It's kind of a weird dichotomy between the two. So they're giving up too many shooting fouls, but they're not just like giving up just like, random reach-in foul. It's again, kind of a weird split between. So let's bring it to the 3 weaknesses. One of them is sending teams to the free throw line too much. Like I said, they're doing a good job getting steals and blocked shots, and they're doing a good job not getting like ticky-tacky fouls, but they are fouling too much on, I guess, drives to the rim or on shots, because even though they're in the 90th percentile in personal foul efficiency, which measures your steals and blocks compared to how many fouls you're getting, they are just in the 15th percentile. You want to be on the higher numbers there in adjusted free throw attempt rate defense. They're also in the 238th nationally in player fouls per game. So they'll get some of those key plays, but they'll also foul as part of it. And you wonder, being the home team here, like, is that going to be helpful for KU? Another weakness for UConn, transition play in big games. Overall for the season, you look at the transition numbers, UConn's averaging like about 11 fast break points per game. They've been fine at it. They've been solid at it and getting those fast break points. But their 3 biggest games, Arizona, BYU, Illinois. In those 3 games, they're averaging just 4.7 fast break points per game. That is a very low number. That would rate out just 359th nationally if that were their mark for the full year. And also, if you want to look at their exhibition against Michigan State, impressive overall game. They beat Michigan State, but just 4 fast break points there too. So this has not been a great fast break offense in the bigger games so far this season. Kansas is going to hope that continues, and that could be a big advantage for them, for a Kansas team that has a great fast break offense. That's how UConn has an excellent fast break defense, but more on that later. Rebounding in big games would be the last kind of weakness here for UConn. So for the full season, the rebound numbers look excellent for UConn. For the full season, they're in the 86th percentile nationally in adjusted offensive rebound rate. They're in the 93rd percentile nationally in adjusted defensive rebound rate. Those are both great. But again, if we just look to the bigger games, which is probably more applicable here for Kansas, right? We're early in the season. If you've only played, 7, 8 games to this point, and half of them are against sub 200, sub 300 teams, some of those numbers might not be fully indicative of what they are. So if we just look to the 3 big games that they played, they are just in the 27th percentile in offensive rebound rate, which are ranked 289th nationally. They are just in the they have a 27% offensive rebound rate. I misread that, which is 289th nationally. And then they just have a 65% defensive rebound rate, which would rank 296th nationally. And again, if we want to look at the exhibition games against Power 4 opponents, against Boston College, similar numbers in both. Against Michigan State, they did have a good offensive rebounding game, but right around that number in their defensive rebound rate as well. So in the bigger games, they've struggled a bit rebounding. Maybe that's something KU can take advantage of. Are there players to watch in this one? For Kansas, we're going to go Darryn Peterson. I mean, if he's back, he's the player to watch regardless of who KU is playing. KU could be playing, Sonoma State. KU could be playing UConn. KU could be playing the Lakers. Either way, that would be the storyline for KU if Darryn Peterson was back, right? So that becomes a player to watch. But also, he's the type of player when you're taking on an elite UConn team that could kind of take you over the top in an opportunity like this. Darryn Peterson kind of becomes the guy there. Now, if he can't go, I would pick Flory Bidunga. I'm going to do 2 for each team just because then Flory would kind of assume being the go-to guy. We'll get more on Flory, though, in a second. Tre White is our other player to watch for KU. He has a tough matchup with Alex Karaban, who's a very experienced player. And it's interesting because you have a couple of seniors here with White versus Karaban. You have it's funny because Karaban sounds like caravan. So you would think he's the guy that's traveled around. He's been at the same spot all this time. Tre White has been the guy who's been at all these different schools at all these times, right? And it's a fun matchup because it's 2 kind of wings who Karaban, more of your stretch 4, really intelligent player, does a little bit of everything. Tre White is kind of your brute force. I'm going to drive into you. Can Tre White maybe get Alex Karaban into foul trouble? That would be helpful for KU. Tough matchup for him, but I think it's a fun matchup on both ends. And then for UConn, we are going to go Alex Karaban, 14 points per game, almost 6 rebounds, 2.6 assists. So again, just a little bit of everything. And he's shooting 51% from the floor, 50% from 3, and 82% at the foul line. Now, it's going to be interesting because when KU goes their 2 big lineups, it might be Bryson Tiller on Alex Karaban, right? Does it behoove Kansas more to put Tre White on him? That's going to kind of be the interesting matchup. Whereas I think KU's played well in their 2 big lineups. Does it make more sense to play more of Tre White at the 4 in this specific matchup to try to guard Alex Karaban? And then Silas Damari Jr., he is a Georgia transfer, off to a fine start. 12 points, 4.7 rebounds, 5.9 assists per game, kind of that Tristan Newton role. And he's shooting 56% from the floor, 77 at the foul line. Now, one thing that scares me a little bit, because this is the classic KU thing, right, is a guy who's struggling from 3, has a big game from 3. The thing is, Damari is a good 3-point shooter. He shot 37% from 3 at Georgia last year on decent volume. But so far this year, he's only at 27% on a bit of lower volume. So am I worried that this is the reversion to the mean? This is the wake-up game from 3 for Silas Damari? You bet I am. Let's get to our keys to the game for KU, plus our player matchup. Hawks to soar, all that next. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time. Hey, the World Cup is coming to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Obviously true here, right? We got World Cup coming to Kansas City. So you just pull up the app. Layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups, compare seat views. You pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets, again, right here in Kansas City, and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. Thanks again for joining us on the show here on Locked On Jayhawks and making us your first listen every day. Don't forget you can check out Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. They just talked about KU on their most recent Monday episodes. Make sure to give that a shout over there. They always do great work with those guys over there. And every so often I'll hop on the show with them. It's a good time, to say the least, with Isaac and company. Okay, Hawks to soar player matchup, keys to the game for KU, all that coming up here. KU offense, let's start here. I think crash the offensive glass. UConn is really good at preventing the other team from scoring in transition. We've seen KU be a much better transition offense than a half-court offense. So if that gets, if that faucet gets shut off a little on KU, how do you score more in the half court? Again, that's where you look to Darryn Peterson. You hope he's back and fully healthy and shakes the rust off, because that would be gigantic for KU in a game like this. But also, when you look at UConn, again, in the games against the three biggest opponents they've played this year, they have just a 65% defensive rebound rate, which would rank 296th in the country. This needs to be a game where KU, who has not been a great offensive rebounding team so far this season, can do some of those things. That would be, huge for KU. And then I would also say just kind of, getting to the free throw line. Reed and Ryby have been two good centers for UConn. Can you get one of those guys in foul trouble? Like, that would certainly be helpful for you as well. And then you look at the KU defense. I think you have to really guard the three-point line and hope some of their good shooters don't kind of break out like Damari and Solobon. This is crazy. I was looking at the shot chart for their Arizona game that they lost. They attempted 4 shots at the rim. They took a lot of shots in kind of the floater area, so that tells me that Arizona was doing a good job walling off right at the rim, and that's going to be easier said than done. But this is a UConn team that can get hot from three, so it's a little scary. Can you find a way to limit their three-point shooters? Solo Ball, again, he's under 30% right now, but he's an excellent three-point shooter. That's a little scary. Silas Damari, we mentioned that earlier, that could this be a reversion game for him? Alex Karaban shooting 50% from three. They've got shooters off the bench. They've got shooters in all these different areas. That could be scary of what UConn can do from three. So make sure you're defending the three-point line if you're KU. And can you find a way to chase him off the three-point line and essentially say, hey, we're going to hope that Flory and Tiller can do a good job of blocking shots without fouling. That obviously is a risk for KU, because if you do chase him off the three-point line and then those guys pick up fouls, then it's kind of a whole different ballgame and not a good way for KU. Our player matchup here is Flory Bidunga versus Terrace Reed. Reed last season rated out 94th percentile in points per post-up. Excellent post-up player. He also, though, can score off the pick and roll. I mean, he's just a very good player, can score in a multitude of ways. And right now, he's leading UConn, is Reed, in points per game at 15.5, rebounds per game at 8.3, blocks per game at 2, and steals per game at 1.3. So just an excellent all-around player right now for UConn. For Kansas, Flory Bidunga is leading them in rebounds per game, blocks per game, and total points scored. So we know Flory can do a little bit of everything. It's an interesting matchup between the two. And, who can kind of win out on that matchup, I think gives a huge advantage to their team, because both teams typically rely on their guy to be the strength of their team, or one of the strengths of their team. And so if you do get an advantage, will it just be a wash? Like we saw the North Carolina game, it was an advantage for Henry Vasar and North Carolina, and that was a problem for Kansas versus, I think in a lot of games since that point, like I would say Flory was an advantage over Patrick Gongba. I would say Flory gave KU a huge advantage in the players era. Obviously the shooting wasn't there in the first half against Tennessee, so maybe that one would be saved, but also he was much better in the second half and still made an impact in other ways. That's just going to be kind of gigantic in one way or another. All right, our Hawks to soar here. I will go Darryn Peterson. Again, we don't know if he's going to play, at least as of time of recording here. Connecticut runs teams off the three-point line, and they also have strong rim protection. It's kind of a hard thing to balance between, but they also play they try to do that. They play an analytical game of, if you want to beat us with floaters and mid-range, we're going to let you. And I think that's a smart way to go about it, especially if you can get that good rim protector, right? We saw them win titles, Donovan Clingan and Adama Sanogo on the inside, and have smart defenders on the outside. Obviously Kansas still needs to, it's not that they should be like, oh, okay, well, they're going to try to take away our rim shots and our 3-point shots. We're just not going to take, no, you still need to find a way to get those shots as easy as possible and take them. But my point being is the difficulty here is if UConn does take away some of those on a specific possession or a key play, how can you react to it? And Darryn Peterson represents your best opportunity to react to it. shooting a three over the defense contested, Darryn Peterson would be your best bet. Shooting a mid-range shot, which they're more content usually to give up. Well, guess what? Darryn Peterson, it's a very small sample size because Peterson's obviously been hurt for a good amount of games here, but Darryn Peterson's in the 97th percentile nationally right now in mid-range field goal attempts per 40 minutes. He's shooting 67% on them right now. Again, that is a small sample size. But doesn't that kind of represent a game wrecker for a plan that UConn typically does? So I think he would be in Hawks the Soar. The big question would just kind of be, would he be able to shake the rust off, that quickly in this big of an environment? But I don't know. He seems like such a competitive kid that I feel like that would kind of be the case. So shocker, Darryn Peterson, if he plays, would be my Hawk to Soar. If he can't, just to give somebody else, I'll go with Bryson Tiller. Again, to the idea that maybe they're more content giving up that floater range, mid-range area. Tiller kind of lives in those areas. I do think that defensively, I'm like, how is he going to match up with Alex Karaban? A little worried about that. But maybe you can counter that with Tiller, playing strong on the inside on the offensive end, giving you rebounds. And could you get, kind of Karaban, who can play, like Karaban will even play some small ball five if he has to. And he does a good job of holding up there. But can you use your length to your advantage in some way if you're Bryson Tiller? All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We'll be back at you Tuesday night to recap whatever happens between the Jayhawks and the Huskies. See you next time.